Welcome to Subscription Prescription, the podcast where you get the information you need to scale your subscription program. Hello and welcome to another dose of Subscription Prescription, the podcast where we help you figure out everything related to D2C subscriptions. I'm your host, Matthew Holman, and today we're going to be talking about payment processing and dunning. Now, I feel like in order to talk about this topic effectively, you kind of need like a PhD in like machine learning, science, all kinds of stuff, because it feels very scientific at times and also a little convoluted. So I would say that payment processing is similar to your credit score. There are people that will tell you how to make it better, but it's actually really hard to kind of figure that out. So what we're going to cover in this dose today are some basic principles around payment processing to help power you with a little bit more education about things you should be worried about. And then we're going to talk in great deal about dunning or payment recovery, because I've got some tips and some tactics that I'd like to share with you that we found to be very, very effective with our clients. So for those of you that are not aware, there is a lot of payment processing happening in subscriptions, right? We have the point of purchase that is happening via your checkout. And that is usually when Shopify and your subscription app essentially communicate together, where Shopify is essentially doing what's called tokenizing a payment. So what they're doing is they're taking like credit card information related to your customer, and they are putting it in a safe or vaulting it, and they create a token or a key that allows people to access that information. But you don't get that information yourself because, right, then you would have access to all of your customers' credit card numbers, and that's not safe. So what happens is your subscription app will take that token when it's time to process that order, and we'll say, and I'm very much oversimplifying this, we'll say to Shopify or the other whatever processor involved and say, hey, we've got this order. Here's the token associated with that order. And that token is also kind of like a way of signaling that you have permission to have access to the token as well. We would like you to process this amount against this person's tokenized payment. And then Shopify or the payment processor uses that token to access their vault, causes the process to happen. Once success goes through, the order goes through the regular workflow system, right? Now, while I'm oversimplifying that a little bit, that is in a sense what is happening. Depending on the payment processors you're using, there can be complexity. If you're using Shopify, right, you can be using authorize.net, or you can be using Stripe on their backend, or a version of Stripe within ShopPay. And in the past, say like a lot of different subscription platforms might do their own payment processing, but that's no longer the case, at least on Shopify. You have to be using this kind of system. There's both good and bad for that, right? Shopify having more control means there's more standardization. There's not as much, bad stuff or weird stuff happening. But at the same time, then Shopify also has control over that. Now, let's add some complexity to this, because when we're talking about processing, some of the issues that happen is your own processor, your own ability to charge cards within that processor, whether that's Shopify, again, or another payment processor, has a health score. You essentially show up within that processor when that processor goes to hit a credit card or to use an ACH or a debit or whatever system that customer has used, right? I mentioned ACH because there's some really cool stuff happening with B2B subscriptions coming out, but it is dependent on that bank or the person or the entity controlling that payment method to accept or approve that charge that's coming from, say, Shopify. So let's just say, for example, I use Chase. I have a credit card through them. I buy some protein powder through Shopify. I have a subscription that goes through. The subscription platform has my order start to process. It's going to ping Shopify. Shopify then hits the tokenized payment, which is my Chase credit card. Chase and the bank that is backing that credit card, okay, because there's a lot of players here in the payment game, will then decide whether they allow that charge to go through. And that charge is being indicated by the health of the processor score, right? There's a lot of factors that go into this. A couple years ago, we had the founder of Butter Payments on here. I highly suggest you search on our podcast if you want to hear him talk through a lot of the nuance related to this, because what ends up happening is there's a great deal of complexity with the card you're using, the bank behind that card, the region that you're in, right? There's a lot of nuance here with allowing charges to be processed successfully. But without getting in all the weeds of all this stuff, let's just talk about processor score. You want to have a healthy processor score because that allows you to be more successful initially when you charge credit cards, right? You don't always, not every payment failure is because a credit card has expired or the person has moved. Sometimes, and in a lot of instances, it is because the bank or the credit card thinks that the payment that is being attempted is not valid. It's potentially fraud, or there's some other issue that is flagged with that. And if you think about how I've been explaining this, if you're not lost yet, good for you. But it's pretty complex. You've got all these entities involved that are moving across trying to get your payment to go through in order for the order to happen. So there are several places where there are checks and stuff that happens. So when we're thinking about things like, people don't want to send a billing reminder, right? And then people will go into their credit card and dispute the charge. That impacts your health score. If you're in the supplement space, you're already an at-risk industry within payment processing. You typically will have a lower or less successful score or a lower health score on your payment processing than, say, maybe like apparel or somebody else. And then within each industry, there's nuance as well, depending on how long you've been around, how successful you are, what type of cards you're taking or not. Okay. So there's a lot of, this is why I said it's like a credit score. There's so many factors, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you all the factors you have to worry about to improve your health score. Instead, I'd rather just to point out that there are a few things that are bad for your health score, like chargebacks. That's why we don't like surprising subscribers and why we want a good subscription experience, because a stronger health score on our processing allows us to be more successful at processing in the future. Okay. So understanding all that, there's a lot of different ways to approach all this, thinking through having a good health score. Now, when you're small, the difference between, say, a 91% health score, or should say a 91%. Now, when you're small, the difference between, say, a process success rate of 91 to 92% might just be a couple $1,000s. But when you have 10,000 subscriptions, that's a lot of money. Okay. We're talking about 1% of all the orders you process each month are successful versus not. Huge when it comes from a profitability standpoint. And that's one of the first things we look at when we're auditing brands, is looking at their health score, looking at how successful they are at processing payments, because it's one of the easiest places to make improvements. So I'm going to talk about two main things that I want you to think about when it comes to processing and dunning. The first one is looking at your in-subscription app approach to processing. Now, in the past, this was essentially just a bunch of rules that you set up, like, hey, charge the card this time, and then 3 days later, charge it again, and then 3 days later, charge it again. But most subscription apps are rolling out some kind of like AI or machine learning, or they have a lot more sophisticated rules that you can set up when it comes to this. So kind of the first things first is looking at this process and looking at, hey, if you haven't tested the in-app AI optimization piece, I recommend running that to see how it compares to your normal processing. But also looking at the cadence or frequency of your messages. Credit card dunning is often a question of like, it's like hitting a nail with a hammer. You're just trying to do it over and over again until it works. And so you can test changing how frequently you do that, whether we're doing it every 2 days or every 3 days, whether within the first 5 days we want to try every day in a row, and then we want to wait a couple days for that to go out. You will see in almost every instance, the highest success rate on retries kind of goes down over time. So the first attempt is usually the highest success rate, and then second attempt is a little bit lower, third attempt is a little lower, because generally it takes another try to show that, hey, we're serious, or hey, this is valid. Okay. There are third-party tools out there that do this. A lot of them work on Shopify or work on Shopify and other platforms. I do think they're worth taking a look at. We've worked with Flycode, Redux, Butter Payments. There's a new one that I just met that I'm probably going to be sharing a little bit more about in the near future. You can look at how they're essentially trying to set baselines. Hey, you're normally sitting at a 92% recovery rate. If we can get you to say 94, that's a 2% delta. We're going to charge you 1% on the delta, essentially, is kind of like how a lot of them work. And they work a little bit differently because they will add more sophistication. They have more, they're leveraging all of their clients to see which cards and which banks and how you should be retrying credit cards in that area. Something just as simple as like, hey, the company is based in New York. but you have customers in California, and in New York, the order's processing at like 5 a.m. because of the start of the day, but California, that's 2 a.m. So your bank is like, who the hell is trying to charge a credit card at 2 a.m. in the morning, right? Like even something as simple as that can be fixed by a third-party software system. So we have your in-app, you have your rules, and you have potentially third-party solutions you can look at. And if you have questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to email me or message me, and I can give you some quick feedback, or we can look under the hood real quick for you around the timing and cadence of your messages. But what I want to talk to now is the actual tactics around getting people to fix their payment method. So we've talked a lot about payment processing in general, about how kind of generally the system works, and some of the ways you can try to improve how you're capturing payments initially and as part of like the automated dunning process. But let's talk about what happens if a credit card's failed or something's just not working. How do we reach out to customers? Now, in the past, this method was like, hey, we'll let it retry 5 times, and then we're going to trigger an email, and we're going to trigger an email, and then an email, and an email, and it's just going to say, update your payment method. And this is where things get a little bit messy too, because Shopify's kind of standard process is, hey, if you're using, XYZ subscription app, you got to send a link with the Shopify link to update their payment. It takes them to a Shopify landing page. They have to get emailed another confirmation in order to log in so they can update their payment cards. Oh, oops, sorry. That way that we vault payments doesn't work with your subscription app. Like it's a nightmare. It can be really, really messy. So what we've been doing with clients to find some success is we're starting to segment by the payment failure type or the card type that's being used. And so what I suggest is once you're at a few thousand subscriptions, it makes sense to take a half a day to go set some of this stuff up and I'm going to walk through this kind of logic with you. Okay. So first things first, depending on the subscription app you're using, they might have different rule sets related to how people can update their credit cards. So first pay attention to that, okay? Depending on what you're using, they may have like Autoship Cloud and Skio have some really great systems in place for automating it or updating it within Shopify, okay? Others are gonna just point you to Shopify. So like Autoship and Skio are doing it for you, and then others are pointing you to Shopify. So it's important to keep in mind, if you have that option within those platforms, then use them. If not, then you need to make sure you're being careful along these methods. But there are differences. ShopPay, PayPal, and credit card. Those are 3 different experiences. ShopPay and PayPal are similar in the sense of ShopPay is a program where people are putting in their own credit card information, so it's connected to the credit card. But if ShopPay is failing, it's not always that people need to update their credit card within ShopPay, not within Shopify, if that makes sense. There's a nuance here. It's like a wallet, okay? PayPal is a wallet. So people could have 3 or 4 credit cards loaded. And if you tell somebody they need to update their payment method, and they're using PayPal, but you send them a link to go update in Shopify, all they're doing is updating a credit card in Shopify. The subscription app is still going to use PayPal. So I'm going to repeat that again because this is the critical piece I want you to understand. If somebody's using ShopPay on their subscription or PayPal on their subscription, and you send them a link to take them to Shopify to update their credit card, it won't do anything almost all the time. They have to update their payment method within ShopPay or within PayPal. So sending them a link or message about going to PayPal to updating your credit card because the payment has failed on PayPal, or, and here's where the fun starts, or if you no longer want to use PayPal, here is a different link for updating the payment method on the subscription directly. Here's how to log in, add a new payment method, and swap to that payment method so that we can use your credit card instead of PayPal. That's the ticket here. We're going to use ShopPay and do that way. PayPal, we're going to give people instructions on how to update their wallet, or here's how you change the payment method on your subscription itself. Or if it's a credit card, here's the link to go update that. And so when we're testing and optimizing this, we can go through and build out separate flows that we're branching out on for a failed payment reminder and sending people messages about how they need to update their payment in ShopPay, or they need to update their payment in PayPal. And if they don't want to update in PayPal, here's how they switch it, or here's how you update a credit card. So adding that nuance, breaking that out by method is going to be really much more effective at dunning or payment recapture, because you're going to give people, hey, you need to go through this door. You need to go through this door. So we're going to send the people that need to go through the right door to the right door. Okay. And again, as you're improving that process, getting better at dunning makes your health score better, because if you can get the payment recapture to happen sooner, more successfully, that helps your overall health score as well. Okay. Talked a lot about payment processing and health. I feel like I need to go back to school and get a master's degree in like statistics or something else to be able to talk about this more effectively with you. But the truth is we've looked at hundreds of subscription brands. One of the things that we look at all the time is payment processing and dunning and how to improve it. So while I am not a rocket scientist when it comes to payments, I will tell you that what we know does work. Pay attention to your health score. Make sure that you're taking care of testing either in-app or third-party solutions to optimize your payment processing features. And then look at building out dunning. Dunning is the one thing you kind of have more control over than anything else, of how you're messaging and communicating. There's even simple things like, hey, we're going to give you a $10 store credit or 200 loyalty points for updating your payment off of PayPal, for example. You can use incentives like that to get people to go and do what you need them to do, so you can process their payment and send them your product. Okay, that's it for this week's dose. Stay tuned to next Tuesday for another episode of Subscription Prescription. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe so that you can get notified when new episodes come out each week on Tuesdays.